Hey everybody, today on BleepinJeep, I'm going to teach you how to grow your own food and live off the land. Just kidding, we're actually going to put a 6-inch long arm kit that I got from Iron Rock Offroad on. Check it out. We're also going to answer some of those questions you guys had from the last Rat's Nest video, so stay tuned. So where I had stopped on the last video, we had just welded on these unibody stiffeners. I am going to show you something real quick. I did use a JKS inner steering box stiffener, which runs sleeves and actually supports the unibody from being able to crush when you put on your steering box. The reason I did that, once again, is because this thing's been hit. Usually outer braces are more than enough, but because of what the front end had went through, I wanted to make sure that it was going to be okay. So I was reading through the comments and I seen that half the people on there really want me to build this into some hardcore rock crawler, and the other half want me to do this as cheap as possible. And I understand where both sides are coming from, and I want to kind of address that real quick. I had stolen everything off the Comanche. The Comanche's chassis was in real rough shape. Now the guy that bought it, he's going to rebuild it. He's going to cut it up and fix it and make it his. I understand that not everybody can just buy somebody else's project. And being that it was my old rig, I know every part of it. My goal for this thing is 37-inch tall tires. Why I chose 37s is because I think that's a good mid-range level tire. I cannot run a Dana 30 axle and have it hold up to a 37. That's just not going to happen unless I only go to the mall. At the same time, I understand that not everybody is going to find a welded together Snow Fighter Dana 60 from a 78 or 79 Ford. For that axle, I mean, people want $1,500, $2,000 and by the time you build it, and if it still had the king pins on it, which mine didn't, but if it still had the king pins on it, you'd have to do the outer knuckles because they're no good really. And then you have to build the whole axle. You'd be better off just calling Terraflex and having an axle built at that point by the time you buy it and put all your parts into it. What we're going to do, I am going to bolt those axles in because today I want to put this long arm kit on, but I'm going to show you these axles real quick. So in the aspect of keeping it reasonable, I'm going to keep the Atlas that has that Northwest Fab black box in front of it, and I may use it for another project in the future, along with that front 60. This is a 99 to 04 Super Duty 60. I literally paid $150 for it. I've seen these axles anywhere from $75 to $400, which I think is a pretty reasonable price for a Super Duty high pinion 60 axle that you can get at any junkyard or salvage yard. I should also mention the reason that these 99 to 04 Super Duty 60s are cheaper and less desirable, as everybody wants the 05 and up, is because the 05 and up has a much bigger knuckle, so you can run a much bigger U-joint or a bigger RCV ball depending on what axle you want to run in there. So I also picked up this axle. This is a Dana 44 high pinion. I paid $200 for it. It's out of an old Ford Highboy. These axles are still kind of hard to find, but they price in the range of $100 to $400 also. I do want to keep the rear 60 that I already have, that I pulled out of the Comanche. That is going to go in that Cherokee. So I'm going to build one of these. So I kind of want you guys to let me know. You let me know in the comments which one you want to do. So things I've learned in the past from putting a heavier full width axle on Cherokees and Comanches is that I want everything extra supported and welded together. So this track bar bracket here, I'm going to weld on. In the past, I've actually broke here and broke the motor mount, and it actually peeled this whole thing back before with just a Dana 44 axle, not even a Dana 60. So not only am I going to weld it here, but I'm also going to make a bracket that goes from here across the unibody to the other side of the frame. And then I'm going to do the same, even though I have the steering box braced on both sides and sleeved, I'm going to go ahead and do a brace across to the other side of the frame as well. So that way everything that has tension on it or torsion on it is supported on both sides of the unibody on top of being welded in solid. Why did I put that cover back on? Oh, and it's filming sideways. First things first, to put this lift kit on is I want to get the brackets and the cross member up. Lots of room when you don't have a lift. Let's get the old 13mm and pull this transmission mount. Next thing we'll do is put a jack underneath the transfer case back here, holding it up, and then we will take the bolts out, the 2 on each side, for the cross member. If I can get out of here. Clean you up. We got the 4 bolts holding the transmission mount up. Got the transfer case picked up off it. What I like to do to take these studs out is I'll just weld the bolt right to the nut, and it usually just zips them out. I'll give it a minute for that heat to go into the bolt too. So after you weld it, don't try to take it off right away. Wait 10 minutes or so, and that heat has went up into that bolt and kind of loosened it up. And it's just a 15mm. Boom, boom. We'll pull the other 2 off, and then we'll drop the cross member. How do you pick up the front end of your Jeep? I think I need 1 or 2 more 2x4s, but man, I'm pretty sure I got more money in those than I do in that jack. So now that we got the cross member out, we got to bolt up our new control arm brackets. I am going to have to tap this hole with a 7/16 by 14, and that way it can bolt up on all 3 of these. I'm also going to go ahead and clean all this up. This is part of why I haven't done the unibody stiffeners on the frame yet, on this part of the frame, because I want to get this on first, and I want to actually weld it to the uniframe that it currently has, and then we will beef up everything around that when we go to do the unibody stiffeners for the rest of the body. Quick side note, I had a lot of people ask me how I mounted the fender at the bottom when I did these unibody stiffeners / rock rails. And what I did is I just took a body washer, and I'll put you inside here so you can see it, and welded a nut to it, and then just drilled a hole through the fender and bolted it up. And it's that simple. And that'll keep the fender from vibrating out and actually ripping back here. So if you have a situation where your Jeep is really rusty, which I've came across, where these holes are just rotting out and the cross member's falling out or whatever, at that point, then I would have done the unibody stiffeners first. And what I'd have done is drilled all these holes out and then welded nuts on the unibody stiffeners. When I put the unibody stiffener on and burned it in, then you'd have those nuts already welded on for your new cross member. Literally, why grinding all this stuff off or sanding it off is no fun. I only did this little section for that. Look at my hands. I'm just covered. Look at the ground. It's just brown. The instructions say to go ahead and bolt in your upper control arm before you put this in, and I figured out why. Is because if you had to pull this bolt in and out, you'd have to remove your drive shaft, which I could easily just remove my drive shaft. I mean, they're always 8mm on these Cherokees, but since I already have it out, it was just easy enough to go ahead and bolt it in a little real soft, and then I can go ahead and put this up. Oh, it goes in so easy when they're tapped. Now it's just a matter of putting these carriage bolts in. We have a cross member. What time is it? It's sketchy time. What time is it? It's sketchy time. Ooh, yeah. Pump it up. Sometimes you just gotta stop what you're doing and clean up your mess. You like my dustpan? I made it myself. So the easiest way I've found when I go to try to get the control arms in is I've always just taken a ratchet strap, found a hole in the body, hooked to that hole, wrapped the axle, and then just ratchet it in until the hole lines up. And if I need to go up and down, just use a pry bar on the bottom or a flathead screwdriver, and then just tap the top with a hammer. Well, it ain't lined up yet. Maybe if I just give it a little tap, tap, tappy. Tap, taparoo. Oh yeah, getting closer now. So I reused my old track bar because it was cut for this shorter length, with the track bar bracket being up high instead of down low. So like many Jeeps, we probably know that the shock or the brake line is going to end up being the limit strap to the flex of this rig. One of the things one of the things I've had happen though is broke a shock, lost shock bolts, or actually had the post pull through the body, is then the coil droops out far enough, the coil pops out. And when all you have is this sitting here as your bump stop, that really doesn't do anything to keep that coil in. So what I'm going to do is, I have these lower bump stops. When you drill and thread out the lower bump stops, I have an extra set, and I'm going to put those up here. So all I'm going to do is just weld a plate onto the base of this. I know some of these thread off, but this one isn't. This one's actually welded in. I know some of them are threaded on and some of them are welded on. This one's welded in, but I'm just going to weld a plate here with a nut on it, and then that way I can thread this in. And what that's going to do is, this will not fit through the top of the coil. So it won't fit through the top of the coil, which then won't allow the coil to fall out as long as the bottom is plated, so it can't fall out either. So the distance between here and here is 2 inches, so I just got a 2-inch washer, welded a nut to it, and then I'm just going to set it up there, take this puck and zip tie it to the side of the coil. But because I'm lazy, I'm just going to try to hold it. Alright. So one thing to take note of with the iron rock kit is that this joint is actually welded on the post at an angle so that it sits straight inside here. So I turned my zircon the wrong way because I had it 180 out, and then I was like, why is it so crooked? And I should have read the instructions because it shows it, but I flipped it at 180, and then now it's straight inside here and not sitting off camber. And then every time I put any of these in, I always use anti-seize on every one of these threads. I'll actually even spray inside the tube with some WD-40, and that'll kind of keep inside the tube everything from rusting up on you later on if you ever have to adjust stuff or take things apart. I set my lower control arms to about 36¼ inches. You can see how low the pinion is. I got plenty caster, so I need to roll the axle up. I have a jack underneath the yoke on that side, and then I have this board here. Depending on which way this axle tries to go when I take that upper control arm off, you know, it's going to try to roll one way or the other. So with the jack under there, it'll keep it from rolling backwards, and then I have this board so it'll only let it go this far, and I need to roll it forward anyway. So I got my axle where I want it, I got my caster where I want it. I even set the track bar, and the way I've always done that is just come off the post of the track bar and then find a spot on the tire that's the same line, and maybe the center of the tire, and then just do the same on the other side and make sure they line up, adjust your track bar accordingly, and you're done. Now we need to straighten the brake lines out, and we're not going to change the hard line out, but what we're going to do is straighten it out. And really, because it has this coil support, it shouldn't crush, but you got to be really careful. You don't ever want to crush your hard line on your brake line, but you can just kind of walk it straight, and then same with down here if you're just real gentle with it. And I've done this by hand a ton of times. You can use a brake line tool if you want to. So when it comes to suspensions, one of the major reasons why I chose iron rock over some of the other ones is a couple reasons. When I first built my very first Jeep Comanche and built my own long arms, they didn't make long arms for Comanche at the time, and I did what most of them are now, which is just a lower long arm and then a Y-link going up to the upper brackets. And what was happening is every time I was flexing, I kept wearing out the bushings or wearing out my Johnny joints or breaking a weld, or something was always happening. And it was actually my buddy Shannon Campbell who said, well, take a pin and pinch it between your fingers and try to flex it. And when you flex, you feel the pin binding, it's twisting between your fingers. He said, now take one upper control arm off and now do it. Now it's not binding anymore. I took my upper passenger control arm off and off that Y-link, and the way the Y-link worked then is now everything flexed great. Not only did it flex great, when I went off stuff at angles, the body didn't chase it. It would just flex and drive down. So it even actually four-wheeled better too. You know, later on, companies started making long arm kits. I see Iron Rocks, I'm like, these guys understand suspension dynamics, because their first long arm kit for a Cherokee was a Y-link on one side and then the lower long arm on the passenger side. They were one of the few that actually had what I considered a correct suspension dynamic to it. But then they stepped it up and said, well, that's not good enough. We're going to redesign it again and make a full 3-link, and we're going to make it where you can actually have access to your transmission, to your transfer case. If you need to drop it out, you don't have to drop your suspension out. And a lot of companies won't take the time to readdress stuff once they've built it. Once they went through the R&D of it and done it once, they don't want to do it again. So props to Iron Rock for that. That's why I'm running it. That's why I like it. And that's why I'm using it. The kit comes with new copper washers. If you have to reuse your old ones, if you for some reason you lose the ones that come new, that wouldn't be the end of the world. But it comes with brand new ones. You kind of want to make sure the surface is clean before putting it on. And you want to drop your flashlight. So you want to make sure you have one washer above and one washer below, so that way it seals good when you make it up. The kit also comes with a new brake line bracket. So now all you have to do is screw that in. It comes with self-tappers, and then we can just put the hard line right into there. And then it has a little clip that holds the top. Yo! So here's one trick. When I go to pull the brake line, you know, I have it pinched off still so it's not leaking fluid. So this line's still full. But when I take this off, I want to be quick on my transfer over to my new brake line. So obviously getting the brake line, the hard line off, you really want a line wrench because it has much more contact on it and the odds of it stripping are much less. Once you break it loose though, these are really slow to try to get brake line loose. So I keep an open-end box wrench with me also, and that way I can quickly get it loose, get it snugged back up real fast, and then I can tighten it back down with the line wrench. Boom. Easiest way to put a rubber boot or rubber grommet in a shock. Get it set in there a little bit. Make sure you're at the boot, not on the shock. Done. So that one's pretty tight. We'll just throw that one in the vise. Just kind of set it in there. Vise time. Easy money. Walk it up and down a little bit. Done. What's this? Hello. If you remember this Dana 60 that I had in the Comanche, I had a single-ended ram, full hydraulic steering, so I did not have a drag link or a steering box. In this case, I'm going to need one at least temporarily here to get the Jeep moving around until I can order my Barnes kit to redo my entire steering. I'll just do a whole new tie rod and drag link and get their whole kit. But here's what I got planned. So what I'm going to do is just make a temporary drag link with an old piece of A-true, and I'm just going to weld the nut right there, just tack weld the nut to the end of it, cut it to length, and then I'll tack weld the nut to the other side, and then I can always grind the tack welds off, but at least then that'll give me something to be able to steer this thing temporarily until I can make my good solid DOM steering. So I drove the Cherokee out and I brought in the rear 60. The one thing about Comanches is from the door up, they're exactly the same as a Cherokee. Or about mid-door back, they're completely they're their own design. Shock mounts are in a different place, or leaf spring perches. Leaf springs are different. They're actually narrower on a Comanche, so I'll have to cut these off to move them out. This is a what they call a Dana 60 HD, the heavy duty Dana 60, and I'm not really sure what years they came in certain vehicles. I know one of the things you can tell is they got this extra thick rib and this extra ribbing in the 60 to make it an HD. The nice thing about that is the spindles are already big enough to fit 35 spline axles. A normal Dana 60 rear, you actually have to get your spindles bored out to be able to fit 35 spline axles. So a lot of guys end up just running 30 spline shafts in the back if they're running a 60. So a couple things. I need to change this yoke out because it's a 1350 yoke. I want to run 1310s. But ironically enough, it was weeping just a little bit. And if you look at the seal, where the body is here, I don't know if you can see that, but it's actually wore in right there. And that's something that a lot of times I've found this, that replacing just the pinion seal sometimes isn't always the best case. And you can replace the pinion seal, but if you got a groove in your yoke, it's just going to keep leaking. So when I do yokes, I go ahead and buy brand new ones. I got this from Dana Spicer. I want to say it was 45 bucks with the bolts. I can't remember. Maybe it was 35. I can't remember now. I bought it a while back. But before I slide it on, I'll go ahead and grease this up really good. I always use a Crimson style grease or something that's waterproof. And then I'm also going to go ahead and hit the threads of the pinion with some red Loctite. So I cut these off because I know I have to move them, and cleaned them up as good as I could. Tried to get them round again. Obviously there's a little bit of gap where I'll have to fill once I get them set. So the axle's cleaned up. My reused perches are cleaned up. I got them set 1 inch back to kick the rear axle 1 inch back. I did go ahead and just kind of softly bolt them on there. They're not tight, but that way when I go to set it on the axle, I can move everything around where I need it. Time to pull a sway bar and shocks off. I do have a couple little tricks on how to do that. And then we got to get the leaf springs out and get this axle out of here, because let's face it, nobody wants a Dana 35 if they can prevent it. Come on into the dark side. My brake line looks extremely rough, so I'm going to hit that with WD-40. If you ever have an issue with this bolt coming loose, you can try spraying in WD-40 here, which I've done in the past. If that doesn't work, then you got to take a cutoff wheel and cut this chunk out, fold it open, and you can get right into the bolt from here. But the bolt does stick through here if you can get enough penetrant up in there. These shock bolts, if they've never been changed, I always hit these with an impact. Just a little 3/8 impact or something, but something with speed and a ratchet. If I hit it with just a manual ratchet, 9 times out of 10, I break the bolt off. If I've hit it with an impact, 9 times out of 10, the bolt will actually come out. So that's been kind of the luck for me. We're also going to remove the sway bar because, you know, sway bars are from all crawlers. At some point somebody's changed a shackle out, which means this bolt has came out before. But if you ever have an issue with this bolt, kind of the same deal. I tried to spray into here with WD-40. If you can get up in there, you can actually get to that nut and that bolt head, and hopefully that'll get it loose. If not, you kind of have the same scenario where you're going to have to get in from inside here. You have to take your rear bumper off and get in just to get to this bolt. Any YJ guys out there? Need some stock Cherokee leaves to stretch the back out? Let me know. Look at the beef difference between this shackle from Iron Rock and this one that was ordered off of eBay. You can see that the plate is already way thicker. The design is stronger, more support. you have a greasable bushing so that you can actually keep that bolt grease so it doesn't ever seize up onto the sleeve. China doesn't care if my shackle rips in half. So I got the axle in, I got the rear suspension on. All the bolts, I did go ahead and anti-seize them before I put anything back in. I also left everything just snug. It's not tight yet because you don't want your suspension components tight until you get it back at ride height, and you kind of want to work it a couple times, and then you can go in and tighten them all up. Once I get them tight, then I just got to measure my axle left to right, make sure everything's true from the wheel point to the center of the leaf spring bolt, you know, or the center pin, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to set my pinion angle, which I plan on running a double cardigan rear drive shaft, or what most people just call as a CV rear drive shaft. So I want my pinion aimed directly at the transfer case. If I were running a regular just U-joint to U-joint style, then I want my pinion in line with the angle of the transfer case. Basically, if it comes out at 0 degrees, then I want my pinion at 0 degrees. Otherwise, you're going to get this weird walking sensation out of the drive shaft. But since I'm going to run the double cardigan, then I'm going to have that pinion cranked up right at the transfer case. I still got to weld my shock brackets back on, but it's no different than if you were just putting this lift kit on. You would literally just bolt your shocks up. So I do still have a transfer case cross member for this thing. I'm not going to run that Atlas out of the Comanche in this. I want to do something. I'm hoping to find, if you know anybody that has a 2003 to 2006 Rubicon, that 241 OR rock track, hit me up. The next video, I'll have this stuff buttoned up. Everything will be tightened down. We'll go ahead and paint mark all the bolts so that I know that none of them are going to get loose, or so I can pay attention to them, because you want to double check all your suspension bolts about a week or 100 miles, you know, 50 to 100 miles after you've driven it. And maybe I'll have some wheels and tires on here too, so it doesn't look like a Hawaiian beach cruiser. If you've ever seen those, that's about how they look. Wide and a little tired. So obviously I'm doing a lot of little extra things because I'm throwing these 1-ton axles under this Jeep. But if I were just putting this lift kit on, it's actually really, really easy to put on. I mean, this Iron Rock kit comes with a really good set of instructions, and it'd probably be like a 6-hour job, minus you know, however long it takes you, an hour or so to cut those lower control arm brackets off. Until next time, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Check these ones out. I'll see you guys. Thanks.